Welcome back, friends. This is episode 161, and we're going to talk about reparenting our inner child to increase our intuition. So this is an exciting topic to share. We're going to kind of combine a couple of things because when we think of how we met challenges or difficulties, or like when we got in trouble as a kid, and what tools and like the experiences that we had, how that shapes who we are today and our worldview, but also how that shapes how much we trust ourselves, right? Oftentimes, when we're in situations as a child, and our parents, coaches, teachers, pastors uh put rules or like reprimand us if we do something wrong or if we do something that's not appropriate, we can often internalize those situations, right? And based on that reaction, sometimes we internalize those situations or those consequences. And if we have a tendency to create a scenario, right, within our mind and even within our body that says, hey, I have to be careful, or I'm not going to create that reaction again for fear or for whatever reason. And we internalize that. We often internalize that to the point where we don't trust ourselves, because when something happens, like for example, um you're a kid and you were riding your bike, right? And you were riding your bike um down a hill, and your parent says to you, hey, don't go too fast, or you're gonna fall. And you're going down the hill, you lose control, you fall, right? You scrape up a knee, you're injured, you've got rocks uh in your leg, you're crying, you're upset. And here comes an adult figure and they say, I told you so, right? I told you not to ride down that hill, or I told you were going to fall, or XYZ. They may be yelling at you. They may be upset because they're scared, right? Because you're injured. But then we internalize that as a kid. And so sometimes, that's the voice that we hear of, oh, I may not try new things, or I may not trust that I can ride my bike down this hill without being injured. So then
There's like two different, sorry, can I interrupt?
yeah, please.
There's two different things at play right there in that example that you used, right? So we have um the parent who's instilling you can't trust yourself with the statement, don't ride down that hill fast because you could crash and injure yourself. That already plants the seed that you're not capable of doing this, right? Then we crash. And so now our brain, our reticular activating system, now has evidence. I can't do this. They told me I couldn't, and now I can't. And now your nervous system is dysregulated because the parent in this situation is yelling at you, scolding you, which then embeds it into, this isn't safe for me. It's not safe for me to trust myself.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate you framing that for us. But so you could hopefully when we frame that, we can start to see like that in itself maybe a benign incident, right? Like kids are going to fall off bikes, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's happened. That's kind of how we learn. But when we have an interaction like that, and then we have a tendency to internalize that, that creates this blockage within our energetics and within our intuition. When we have that reticular activating system turned on and filtering for that says, hey, yeah, and using that evidence that this isn't safe, right? Or I can't do it on my own. So then, and as we grow up, as we grow older, sometimes into adulthood, we have a tendency to, like, in the back of our mind, we may have sort of these like gut feelings that arise, or our intuition's trying to tell us something, and we have a tendency to ignore that.
Yeah.
Because
So
we
can I
don't.
interject here too?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So I just had a realization because, I coach a lot of people. And, I've had several women say, like one lady I'm coaching right now, and she was talking about in this, like they're hiring a new director, and how she's like the guys are like showing up and like submitting their applications, and they just have like bachelor's degrees, and they don't have the qualifications, but they went ahead and put their application in. She's like, men just seem to like be able to like put themselves out there more than women, right? And I just saw it in the example that you were talking about. Why? Let's go back to your example of riding a bike.
Yeah.
How many times do boys do dangerous things? And we as a society say, that's just boys being boys. That's what boys do, right? Like, oh yeah, I told him not to, but like he does it. There's a lot of leniency for boys to take risky things, right? Because we just as a society see them as like, well, that's just what boys do. Girls, on the other hand, as a society, we are not supportive of them taking risky things.
Yeah.
Right. So we are conditioned as females, as little girls, to not take risky things because we can't trust ourselves. Just like your example of riding a bike, that would have gone down two different ways between a little boy and a little girl, right? Like, why, her, because we are conditioned differently as females, like, we're not conditioned to take risk. We're not conditioned to engage in that. Boys are more supported to do that, right? So, of course, they build more self confidence, where we then build more self doubt. And I want to pull it to an example as like a teenage girl, because I'm sure most of our listeners are female. So we think about like your intuition, right? It's that little word, like that little voice inside of us, right? And because girls, a lot of our coping mechanisms as children is, sorry, my throat's, is people pleasing and perfectionism, right? So you fast forward into teenage years when you're starting to date. Girls are not encouraged to date and have boyfriends, and it's totally fine for boys to have girlfriends, right? Um, Knowing that our coping mechanisms tend to be perfectionism, we're conditioned to not take risk and perfectionism. So we see girls in situations where boyfriends, their intuition is like, don't date him. This is not a good dude. But our coping mechanism of people pleasing says, I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Mm.
I don't want to be seen as snobby or too good or mean. So I'll just go ahead and date him, even though my intuition says, like, don't do it. And then I don't listen to it and I go ahead and date him, right? He turns out to be a piece of shit, right? Treats us poorly. And it reinforces that belief I can't trust myself because I put myself in this situation with this boyfriend. This happened to me because I can't trust me.
That's a great example. Because as we age, right, from child to teenager, young adult, right, through adulthood, we gain experiences, and again, our brain uses that evidence. And so, uh, if we if we oftentimes get very good at ignoring that intuition, you ignore that gut feeling, because sometimes that gut feeling doesn't always make sense to us.
Right.
And it can be a little bit scary. And if you don't have like that, it's not even that confidence, but like if you don't have that
Self trust.
self-trust, thank you. I was like, oh, I know that you know the word self-trust. To like, yeah, to step out and do something different or to take that risk. I mean, those are scary things, but if you don't have that self-trust, and our brain is constantly doubting that, we have a tendency to really suppress that intuition um, at a younger age. And then as we are in adulthood and we were adults and we're functioning in the world, we have our own kids, right? And that intuition might come up again to say, oh, maybe this isn't the best decision, or maybe we should try something totally new, right? Maybe this isn't the place that we're supposed to be in. Um, but because it's different, right? And because it can be a little bit scary, we don't have a tendency to follow through with that intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge is that when we continuously ignore that, we're perpetuating that cycle, right? Of that mistrust within ourselves, or that doubt of, well, when will I be in a situation, right, where I actually like truly believe and trust in myself to do something or to follow, right, what I know or what I think, could be true.
You won't
Like,
unless you do the work.
right. So oftentimes when we from where we are in adulthood and we start to go and look back at like, okay, this is something that often started when we were younger, we go back and we reparent our inner child and review those scenarios or those situations in our mind and create a different outcome, or reparent in the sense that we provide our inner child with that support, with that like care, and that peace that we needed in that moment. um Oftentimes we can begin to heal those wounds.
Oh yeah. And when I say you won't, that question, I'm like, well, when am I going to do different? You won't do different unless you intentionally go do the work. If you intentionally do the work, you can heal the wounds and you can start taking the action and you can listen to your intuition, right? And I know reparenting is like the word to use, but as I've been digging into childhood trauma, right? I think sometimes it's hard for people to access that terminology, reparent myself, if they come from family systems that are highly dysfunctional, because the example of parents is what they have that's dysfunctional. Then it's like they don't have a concept of what a good parent is and how to reparent themselves. So I do like the idea of relationship to self, right? Like, because we all know how to be good friends,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So if you want to call it reparenting and you can find models of good parents that you can pull from to reparent, like how would this person have acted in this situation? Now I can use that scaffolding to like reparent myself in that. Awesome. But if you can't, then it's like, okay, how is it really like, how would I treat my best friend? What would I do in this situation, with my best friend? Then I take that and I apply that to the relationship with myself. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense because relationships can be a little bit more tangible to
Mhm.
us. And it's learning how to create a healthy relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a journey because, again, yeah, when you come from the perspective of I want to be a best friend to me. Yeah,
Mhm.
that in itself usually creates like a healthier underlying foundation than something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like part of that work is like, like thinking about, I love to third person it. And I heard did she say research? I think a book that she wrote or read said our brain is more likely to change faster when it's like when it has to do with someone else
Hmm.
rather than when it has to do with ourselves, right? Because of that like tribal programming in our primal brain. So that's why I like the concept of third personing it, right? Like my past self, my current self, and my future self. And also like third personing my brain, right? Like my primal brain versus my prefrontal cortex. So how I've applied it in my own life is like my primal brain is separate from me in the terms of like she's the one that's like charged with the responsibility of survival,
Mm-hmm.
right? She also has the loudest voice, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes she's super helpful and sometimes she is not helpful at all. But if I can see her in that third person, then it's easier for me. Like I talk about in my coaching program, like our relationship to ourselves. And when you like say, like you make a to do list for yourself that day,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Like we won't even use exercise. We're just like your to do list for yourself your day today. And you're like, look, here's the things that I want to do and get done today, right? She is watching. Okay, that primal brain, like let's just put a name to her, make it easy, right? Like Alexis is watching me. And if I don't do those things on my list, and if I like procrastinate or avoid or buffer or whatever, right? She is watching that and she is taking down evidence like, oh, well, she said we were going to do this today and then she didn't do it. I can't trust her. I can't trust her to do what she says she's going to do. So I'm going to remain in the driver's seat,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm going to bark the loudest, right? And I'm going to probably shame her or I'm going to like criticize her because this feels horrible. And I believe that shaming her and criticizing her is the best way to get her to change behaviors, which we all know is not true, right? So that's where we get into that self critical thinking. It's like Alexis is constantly watching me. Like, does she do what she says she's going to do? Does she show up? Does she take care of us? Does she honor us? Or does she throw us under the bus? Does she break her commitments to us? Because if I can't trust her, then I'm not going to let her lead.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like my prefrontal cortex is like, that's me. All right. That is like, okay, like I'm sick this week. So I can either put like working out 3 times a week on my schedule this week. And I'm going to give Alexis evidence that I don't do what I say I'm going to do. Or I can think of myself like what would be a like if I were talking to you and you were sick, I would be like, let's not even work out this week, Carmen. Like, don't even put it on the list. There's no purpose in it. It's not going to serve you, right? So then I make decisions from there. Like, okay, well, working out's not going on the list this week. So then I don't give Alexis evidence to not trust me, right? And then I also use like my future self. I think about with that list, like, okay, future Kim is going to have to show up and do that work. And I think about her in a very loving way, like my best friend, right? I'm like, future Kim is going to have to do that work. She's going to have to go through that day. How, like, am I going to be a dick to her or am I going to be kind to her? Yeah. I mean, that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. I think when you split it up like that, right? It helps us to kind of maintain a little bit of perspective, but it also gives you the opportunity to have compassion for yourself, right? Yeah. Because you're not showing up and making that list of like, these are the things I want to do, I have to do, I need to get done. You're creating that intentionally of like, what is going to serve us as a whole, right? Yeah, but what is going to be the best or the healthiest for future Kim, right? How am I also going to nurture Alexis so that she can have that evidence of no, we do what we say, right? Or we yeah, I got that right.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh so it offers a lot of different opportunities in that sense to be able to like nurture back to yourself and to even that intuition say yeah because we're showing up out of a place um of caring, right? We're showing up out of a place of compassion for all parts of us, and that includes our intuition.
Mhm. Mhm.
It also makes it a really neat way for us to like shine in a sense, right? Because also when you're accomplishing those things on the list that you because I can't think of another word of compassionate right now, but because you intentionally, right, put that list together of taking into consideration like where your energy is, right? Where's your mental energy, right? Where's your physical energy is if you're feeling a little bit under the weather. But when you do those things and then you know have the opportunity to follow through, um again to give Alexis a little bit more evidence, you're also creating this positive, healthy cycle, right, within our neurotransmitters, within that dopamine of saying, oh well, I did accomplish these things that I wanted to accomplish this week,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. Instead of coming from that place of, oh wow, well, out of my list of 15 things, I only got 2 done. Yeah. And then retrospectively being like, oh, okay, well, putting it, it's because I was sick or it was because I didn't have the energy. Then we're making excuses, right? Versus being intentional from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think when we can create that supportive, right? Like it's like reparenting, right?
Yes.
Relationshiping ourselves to ourselves, it quiets her down.
Mhm.
And when I can quiet her down and I can also trust myself, I have space and the bandwidth to listen to my intuition.
Yes. Yeah. Um, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? And we can see that. I think I appreciate you sharing that because it gives us a good example on how we can start doing that work, right?
Mhm.
In the present sense of how am I going to make it applicable to um, my everyday life, right? Like how I'm going to make it applicable to gaining that trust within myself.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, when we create those uh, new relationships with ourselves, it's the same opportunity to create new relationships with our inner child.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's a little bit tricky because sometimes we think of, okay, what's happened in the past has happened in the past, right? And a lot of folks will say just leave it in the past.
Yeah, that does not work.
That doesn't work. Yeah.
Does not work. You may not be thinking about it all day, but here's the deal with that. Here's the deal with that. By you saying we're leaving it in the past and we're not dealing with it, right? What's happened has happened, and you have created behavioral patterns from it. And you are still behaving in those behavioral patterns, whether you have looked at that, whether you have left the past behind or not, those behavioral patterns are still showing up in your behavior today.
Exactly. So when we look at creating, right, a healthier relationship with our inner child and with ultimately, right, it's ourselves, we open those doors to, we're talking about intuition, but I mean, it doesn't just stop there, right? We're opening up those doors to change our behavior patterns, to change um our worldview, or to change our programming, right? So that we can show up in the world in a way that we actually want to show up.
Yep.
Yeah. Oftentimes as children, when we have those experiences, I'm going to go back to my bicycle analogy. When we have those experiences like that or something equivalent to it, right? When we internalize this fear, right? When we internalize this aspect, especially for girls, where we're not encouraged to do, it's not even dangerous things, but
Like take risk.
right, risky things, um then we begin to kind of like really close down um our perspective, but we also kind of close down on things that are fun, right? So
Yeah.
when I talk about or like yeah, when I talk about reparenting or like creating a healthier relationship with our inner child, um and we come from this place of fun, right? We come from this place of we can take risks, but we're taking risks and not in a scary space, right? We're taking risks in um a lighthearted, in like a joyful type of way, right? So we can't go back in time, right, and change those things.
Right.
But we can do exercises to imagine things that we could do with our 4-year-old self, with our 5-year-old self, with our 7-year-old self, right? Even with our 13-year-old self, that we may not have had the opportunity to do when we were younger,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when we take that time to visualize, right, that relationship and visualize and the our inner child, and creating that space so that we can feel that peace, that love, that joy, that you know confidence that maybe we didn't get in that scenario or in those actual events, we can begin to rewrite things a little bit, right? And create that healthier relationship to trust ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just an example. So like when I was a kid, I loved riding my four-wheeler. Right. Like I loved just like riding in the woods and like going fast. And I was like, I loved it. And as an adult, like working on like healing my relationship with me, reparenting me, I just made a list of all the things that I loved to do as a little girl.
Mhm.
And now I just try to like do the adult version. So we love to learn and we love to be adventurous, right? So one of mine was like at 40, I got a dirt bike. I never rode a dirt bike before, right? But I got a dirt bike and I started riding my dirt bike and I love it. But it also tapped into that childhood, right? What little Kim liked to do. And it also gave me evidence that I can trust myself. I can learn new things, right? And I can try new things no matter what age I am. And I can be adventurous and wild. Um, which like just taps into that childlike energy, but it also has that new layering of like doing it and trusting myself to take the risk, trusting myself to like be my best friend through it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's perfect, right? Because we have the opportunity to um create that like because you're essentially you're recreating that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a space of here we are as an adult, right? We all had things that we did that we enjoyed as kids,
Mm-hmm.
that we thought of as fun. And when we start bringing that back in to our space, into our life now as we show up today, right? We're rebuilding that connection,
Mm-hmm.
rekindling that connection with our inner child. And that really starts to create what we call this, I don't know if we, but what creates this creative channel that some folks talk about, in order for our intuition to really like grow and flourish. And
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that. That's very well said.
yeah, so I that's why I like to talk about it. That's why. Yeah. It's one of those things that's like, okay, yeah, so we hear about these things, like, right? We hear about reparenting our inner child, or our, reparenting ourselves, or creating that relationship. But what does that actually look like? What does that actually mean?
And
Right?
why? Like, why do we have to do it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm excited that we share some really good examples on how we can begin that process and why.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Excellent. I think that's all I had to share.
That's all I got. All right, guys. Share with us. Hit us up in the DMs of like, okay, I took this and here's one thing I did, like one activity I did or something I did to like start connecting with that inner child within me. We would love to hear that.
Yes.